Hunter Zafar. I'm Director of Technical Services here at HSO. I look after all our technical capabilities in the business, including data and AI. I've been with the business almost 20 years now, and AI is something that I'm very passionate about.
Hi everybody, Matt Burkwhistle. I'm the Manufacturing Industry Director here at HSO UK. I'm responsible for all of our go-to-market activities and supporting our customers. So very pleased to be here talking to you about AI today.
And we have a very special expert view for everyone today. So we've got a three-part mini-series here on the topic of, you guessed it, AI. This is what everyone's talking about. And what we're going to do in this three-part series, so we're going to begin with the basics of AI, the platform. How do you begin an AI project? And then we'll pick into how do you set your business case? How do you sell AI into the business? And then we'll move into, okay, so you're moving from sort of boxed up AI, for want of a better phrase, into more customizable AI that fits your organization. So without further ado, in part one of this expert review, to Sif, sir. So why must any AI project or any tech project, or for that example, why must it begin with data? Why is data the most important thing, do you think?
I mean, this is a very common question that I get all the time. Data is a bloodline of AI. You probably heard this, and I think this is probably a statement that summarizes it. And the reality is that the most intelligent models or AI solutions will get things wrong and can get things wrong, and that generally down to the poor quality of data, or the data which provides two versions or multiple versions of the truth, or the data that is not clear or ambiguous, that does not give that clarity to the large language model or the AI engine to answer things. The flip side of this is that sometimes not only the quality of the data, but also the quantity of the data as well. Is the data enough to be able to train a model, as an example? So data is something that literally, in my view, can make or break your AI project.
Did you say that AI gets things wrong? Did you really say that?
Absolutely, AI things get wrong. And I mean, if you provide enough wrong evidence of something, it will start believing that, and it will start producing those results as well. So it is. I always say this: AI solutions are probably the most clever things that you will come across, and they're probably the most dumbest thing that you will come across at the same time, because they're completely relying on the data that they have been trained on.
Should you clean your data then before you even begin? Is that point one? Is that start one?
Yeah, yes, I think so. But I think there is also something that we all need to appreciate, that if you've been collecting data for many, many, many years, like most of enterprises, over 2 decades worth of data, how much effort you want to put in to start cleaning and consolidating and all of that before you start your journey with AI. I think it's always the right balance. It always depends on the use case. There are so many factors that play a role in it. But generally speaking, I think we should look to start with the cleanest set of the data possible, available data, because that probably would be the more practical approach, rather than looking to, clean and consolidate all your data before you start your first project.
Matt, do you see organizations taking that approach, or do they see it as something else? Do they start somewhere else? Are you seeing sort of variations?
There are variations, and I think, just picking up on what Tasif was saying there, the challenge is where an organization thinks they have to clean their data, and that's where they need to start. And that then gets in the way of really where you want to be driving quick, rapid benefits. You've got to be pragmatic about it. And the organizations that are successful in getting going with their AI journey are the ones that recognize, hey, my data's not perfect, but it's good enough to start with. I've done some basic cleansing of stuff. I've got rid of the crappy stuff, but I know where my sources are. I know how I'm going to want to use it, and I'm just going to start using it. And in time, I will start to use some of the tools that AI can do, and I'll cleanse it and make it better. And that's a much more effective way.
And when you're talking about sources here, you're talking about things like your ERP systems, your CRMs, your supply chain warehouse management, and then on another side, you've got your systems that are managing customer inquiries, internal policy documentation, internal communication. So there are so many different sources. And what data sources do you need to consider when it comes to AI? I guess what I'm asking is, do organizations look at AI as this one big project, or do they look at them with these different source silos and they approach it in these different ways, man?
I would say to people, the biggest problem is not the silos of data that exist in the business application systems like ERP or CRM. It's more than likely going to be the data that is unstructured and is held in SharePoint or on network drives. That's where the biggest challenge is, in order to get a hold of that. And the reason is that typically the security access is not as strong as it needs to be in order to make an effective AI solution.
Yeah, I think the way I see this is, we as as a businesses have been really good at being able to harvest the value from their structured data to an extent for many years. What does that mean? The structured data mean your ERP, as you said, Michael, or your your front end CRM systems, or your warehousing manufacturing systems, and their ability to do kind of an analysis of that data. That's been around for many years. But I think where AI, some of the recent advancements in AI help, is to harvest the rich information that you have in unstructured data. That's your PDFs, your Word documents, your Excel documents on your SharePoints, and so on. Not only that, but I think what I'm seeing from experience is that some of the real good use cases are where you actually combine the two, and then you can start harvesting the value and being you're getting those productivity gains. Give you a real recent a very basic simple example. And in order for you to implement and enforce, let's just say, something simple as your expense policy in your organization, that structure data is always being there, right?
Yeah.
And how you can being able to report on it and do the kind of what the workflows on it to reject, auto reject, this, that. But how can you combine that with all an expense policy, which is an unstructured document written in a Word document somewhere, and how you can combine the two to be able to do some advanced analytics and being able to identify outliers and things like that. So I think in recent sort of for the last 2 to 3 years, the advancements in the technology has enabled us to be able to not only get the goodness from your structured data, but also the unstructured, and as well as some of the semi-structured data sources as well.
Do you think do you think people are afraid to allow access to mostly unstructured data for the problems you could imagine, that getting access to people's wage slips and all these sorts of things that you hear about all the time? Do you think that's still a concern? Are people still afraid about that?
That is absolutely a concern. There are all these horror stories out there as well, where people have turned on, for example, Copilot, and suddenly it's going and finding out the information that you didn't knew you have access. We've got to understand the reality. So the ground reality is that something as Microsoft M365 Copilot wouldn't be able to access the data that you do not have access otherwise, right? So it's not that it is able to access the data that you can't. Is the difference is that is actually now able to find that information, and you don't even know that you have access. So I think this raises a great question, where to start. And your point that you earlier raised, around the data readiness. This is another level of data readiness. Is your organization ready to enable this? And I think that's where you got to go through a process, and some of this structured approach that are quite a known approaches out there that allow you to establish a framework and an approach before you kind of go big bang, and then you
Yeah.
start hitting these issues.
Just to let you both know, I know how much you earn given to some AI glitches in our own systems and data. So it's vastly more than me, I'll let you know. So, Matt, how would you help or advise organizations that they overcome some of the objections that sort of been raised there around
It,
security, for example?
it's about confidence, because it doesn't matter how many times you can talk through to organizations and say, please be assured your data is going to be safe. You've actually got to prove that. And the way that we go about proving that is to start off in an area of the business that everybody is quite happy and agree there are some benefits It might be with your sales force. You might be looking at ways to allow them to research their customers better. Just turn that capability on, manage that data set, show how that will work and what guardrails you've put in to actually doing that, and be able to then demonstrate how simple it is and how controlled it is about then doing more and more. Because when I talk to manufacturers, particularly when it comes to technical data and what's going on in the factory, that's their IP. That's what they're really concerned about. They don't want that getting out to their competition. They don't want, you know, countries like China trying to hack into their information. So that's a real big concern. So the idea is start off small, very controlled, demonstrate it, and then you can start to move forwards from that.
Is there, to see if is there afraid, are people afraid also where the data actually resides, in which data center, in which countries, in which locations? Is there an issue around that as well? Thought process around scam mongering as well?
I think this goes to the actual implementation and how you adopt AI. In fact, in many ways, unless you have a proper governed approach in terms of using these fantastic capabilities, the likelihood is that you are actually at higher risk because every organization, every individual realize the potential of the Gen AI as an example, and unless you can provide them the structured and controlled and secured way of taking advantage of this technology, you are actually at a higher risk because you know how many barriers you're going to put in place for people to stop going into and using free open large language models in a sense. So I think it's the right balance. You got to give people the ability to take advantage of this technology in a structured way and way which is secure, but at the same time you got to go through all the stages and processes where you are starting small on a data set that you can trust, on the data that is secure, and accessible to the people who are going to be the potential user of this. And I mean, there are a lot of approaches. You could start with a much tighter security and open it up as it need, instead of just opening up all everything that is out there. There are tools even allow you to start differently. Some organizations will start where the as a user, if I have access to a SharePoint site, and your Copilot can start with absolutely everything as well. Other approaches is creating very structured agents that are only restricted to the knowledge they have been given. And so therefore, yeah, it depends on organization. But the key point, in my view, that I think it's important is you've got to give people the ability to use the secured and structured way of taking advantage of this, because otherwise you are at actually much higher risk, if organizations don't do this.
About you, Matt, what advice would you give to an organization looking to adopt AI? They're at the very beginnings, their data might be all over the show. What advice would you suggest to them?
I go back to what I was just saying before about finding that area within your business where you know that you can make a difference. And I do tend to find that that is more orientated around the sales process, because it is quite easy to give those tools to your sales force, and they can show you how they're getting their personal productivity, but also how it's helping either make relationships with customers better, or increase the ability to close sales faster, because there are some key metrics that you can put around that. And that's an important part of deciding which areas that you want to attack first. Have that understanding of where you are now and the metrics that you're looking to then influence, and use AI to do that, because that will give you the measurable gains. So that's what I'm always encouraging people to do. It's starting off small, but it's something that will make a very demonstrable improvement to your business.
Good stuff. All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think that's all we've got time for today. I hope you all got something useful from that. And thanks for Matt. Thanks for Tusif. And remember, when thinking about when thinking about AI or any tech project for that matter, start with your data.